Lucy Garbor from Canada was earning a living as a waitress. It wasn't exactly the most exciting job in the world, but there were a few perks. For starters, she didn't need a lot of work experience to get the job, and she could do it at odd hours, which allowed her to attend classes. Admittedly, the pay wasn't great, but she could earn more in tips than any other job that paid minimum wage. Besides, it was also the only job she could get, and she needed to pay rent. She considered herself a fairly decent waitress, and she was a people person too. She got to meet a bunch of amazing and interesting people from different walks of life. Lucy was friendly to everyone, which came in handy in her line of work. But one day, she got the chance to show kindness outside of the restaurant when she ran into a homeless man near her place of work. She saw right away that the stranger was struggling and couldn't take it anymore. So, she decided to act right away to ease his suffering. She had no idea that her generosity would have an unforeseen outcome. Lucy worked at one of Canada's most prestigious restaurants, and since they had 2 Michelin stars under their belt, they expected nothing more than the highest quality of work from their employees. This was okay with her since she had been a hard worker all of her life. She also dreamt of trading her server apron for a chef's apron. She was already studying to be a chef, and this job was giving her the work experience she needed, not to mention the money to pay for her education. The place she worked in wasn't some low-budget diner off the side of the highway that sold menu items for $9.99 or less. The guests who walked through the door of her restaurant forked over several $100s per night on fancy dishes. Lucy was happy that the restaurant was doing so well, because it ensured that she would have a job for as long as she needed one. But a part of her had a hard time accepting that some people could afford such pricey dishes while a homeless man went to sleep around the corner of the restaurant with an empty stomach. Lucy always took the same route to and from work, and the homeless man was always in the same spot. Even when the weather outside was frightful, the man was there. But what surprised her the most was that he always smiled at passers-by. She couldn't believe that someone in his situation could ever be this cheerful. She knew that if their positions were reversed, she would be too depressed to smile or engage anyone in conversations. But this guy didn't have that problem. One of the primary reasons why people generally avoid talking to the homeless is that they don't like being asked for money or food. But what Lucy found most interesting about this homeless man was the fact that he never asked for a handout or anything from anyone. All he wanted was for people to talk to him and really see him. Lucy liked this about the homeless stranger, but had no idea that the guy wasn't showing his true self to anyone. Lucy wanted to help the homeless man, but all the ideas that popped into her head were risky because it could lead to her termination. She needed her job to pay for school and to pay the bills. Plus, this job would look really good on her resume once she was ready to take the next step in the culinary world, which was working in the kitchen. But she couldn't just ignore what was happening to the homeless man sitting a few feet from the restaurant. She wanted to take action but had to do it without her boss finding out. Her plan was to take whatever she needed from the restaurant to cook a delicious and satisfying meal for the homeless man, but she had to be very careful. If her boss caught her doing what she was planning on doing, he would most certainly call the cops and have her arrested, and he would fire her too, which is something she could not afford. So, she carried on with her plan very carefully. As she implemented her plan, Lucy kept thinking about Robin Hood, a fictional character who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. At that moment, she felt like a modern-day Robin Hood herself. She was stealing expensive ingredients from a fancy restaurant to feed a homeless man. As far as she was concerned, her actions were justified, but at the end of the day, stealing was still wrong and a crime. She was also well aware of the massive risk she was taking here, but was unprepared for the consequences. Lucy waited for the right time, and then it happened. She heard her boss yelling to his staff like he always did because he was mean as a snake. She figured that while he was in the kitchen being an insane bully, she would go into the freezer and take what she needed. Lucy was able to get into the freezer without anyone seeing her. She started looking for key ingredients she knew no one would miss right away, and eventually placed 20 ingredients in her bag. She had gathered enough ingredients to avoid arousing suspicion, and enough that she could make a decent meal for the homeless guy. She smiled with relief that she had gotten away with her little heist. Once she got home, she allowed her tense muscles to relax. She even smiled a bit because she had done something so bold and gotten away with it. Then, she started doing what she knew best: cooking. Lucy loved to cook because it was fun, and it gave her the chance to be creative. It also filled her with a sense of satisfaction, knowing that she could provide someone with a nice meal like she was about to do. She spent over 2 hours preparing the meal for the homeless man, and it was finally complete. She packed her home-cooked meal in a container and walked over to the homeless man, who was always around the corner from where she worked, and surprised him with it. And when she did, the man looked at her with tears in his eyes. He couldn't believe that she had shown him such kindness. He was used to people handing him a buck here and a candy bar there, but no one had ever cooked him an entire meal before. When he told her how grateful he was, she realized that everything she had gone through to make this happen was worth it. Before she left, she gave him some cash, but then she decided that she wasn't through helping him. Lucy was on cloud 9 because she had helped the homeless man, and it felt so good. In fact, it made her so happy that she decided to make him a warm meal every day for the rest of the week, and he didn't refuse. After all, her meals were tasty and satisfying. There was no way he was going to say no to her cooking. He also knew she wouldn't be able to do this forever, so he enjoyed his good fortune while it lasted. But it was actually Lucy's luck that ran out one day when her boss came knocking at her door. As soon as Lucy heard a series of knocks, she looked to see who it was. It was her boss, and unfortunately, he had seen her too, so she couldn't pretend like she wasn't home. Left with no other recourse, she reached for the knob nervously and opened the door. She was greeted by her boss's angry face and accusations. At that point, she realized she was done for. "You're fired," were the first words her boss had yelled at her when she opened the door. He decided to review the surveillance footage from the cameras in the restaurant. That's when he saw Lucy hiding in the freezer with a bag full of ingredients on the floor next to her. There were so many things going through Lucy's mind, but the most obvious thought was that she could wind up homeless if she couldn't pay her rent. That would have been ironic, and as she sat there, she wondered whether someone would show her sympathy and cook meal for her when the time came. At least she knew one person who would show her kindness and would be her friend if she ended up on the street: the homeless guy she cooked for. A day later, Lucy took a stroll to clear her head and walked past the restaurant she used to work in. As she looked through the window, she felt a wave of sadness and regret crash into her. She realized that despite her noble intentions, she had been very foolish. But there was nothing she could do to get her job back, so she kept walking. That's when she noticed the homeless man she had helped sitting in the same spot he always sat. She needed to talk to someone, and since he was always looking for someone to chat with, this was the perfect solution. The homeless man saw how bummed Lucy looked, and he asked her if she was all right. That's when she told him everything that happened to her. "That's horrible. They can't just fire such a culinary talent, can they? This is truly a great loss for the entire culinary world. I do not agree with this, and am going to put a stop to it," he told her. She was beyond touched by the homeless man's sympathy, but she wasn't sure what he could do to help her given his situation. The homeless man was so angry over the way Lucy had been dismissed from her job that he stormed into her former place of employment with her by his side. However, the moment the mean chef saw them, he walked up to them and demanded that they leave his restaurant at once. But the homeless man wasn't about to back down for anyone, let alone this pompous jerk who had fired the one person who had shown him so much kindness. Then, he told the chef who he really was, and it left the mean man shaken to the core. The next words that came out of the chef's mouth were, "Leave my restaurant at once, you dirty old man. Your kind doesn't belong in a restaurant." But the homeless man wasn't afraid, and he certainly wasn't about to accept defeat and walk away. In fact, he looked more determined than ever to show the chef who was really in charge here. And once he did, the chef wished he had chosen his words a little more carefully. Once the irate chef was done screaming, the homeless man simply laughed as if taunting him. "You really don't remember who I am anymore, do you?" he asked the chef. Before the chef could shake his head, the homeless man removed his dirty coat, the way a chef peels the skin off an onion. Underneath the dirty coat was an impeccable suit, and just like that, the homeless man looked like a brand new man who didn't seem like he was living on the streets. He looked like a regular person. The homeless man saw the look of confusion on Lucy's face and offered her an explanation. "I am not homeless. I am a food critic and rate the quality of the menu and service. A few weeks ago, I decided to eat here for another review, and this restaurant has become so much worse. The service was very good, but the food was way below par, and that is this tyrant's fault. So I decided to do something about it," he said to her. But that's not all he said or did. The chef stood there in shock because he knew that a bad review could potentially cripple his restaurant. But that was the least of his worries. "Last week, I bought most of the shares of this restaurant. That's why I am the new owner of this restaurant. Because my last visit was disappointing, I decided to keep an eye on things from a distance. It quickly became very clear to me that this restaurant isn't managed well." Then the former homeless man turned to the chef and said, "Your dishes are barely edible. That's how gross they are. You're fired." With the horrible chef fired, the former homeless guy had a job opening that he desperately needed to fill right away. Fortunately, he had someone in mind. So, he turned to Lucy and said, "Lucy, the food you've made for me over the past few days was innovative, deliciously flavored, and the best I've eaten in years. Now that a position is open as a chef, I was wondering if you would be interested in the job." Lucy couldn't believe what was happening. This was like a fairy tale ending in a movie. She was a waitress who dreamt of being a chef someday, and now the opportunity to become one was just handed to her. So, loudly she said, "Yes." Today, Lucy not only runs the kitchen, but also manages the restaurant as well. Ironically, none of this would have happened if she hadn't shown the man she thought was homeless some compassion, kindness, and a home-cooked meal. Thanks for watching. Please like and share and subscribe. See you soon.